Greetings and welcome to Zord's Planetary Space Program episode 19. We are starting this off by sending our lathe plane to its destination. I should also say that apparently the third episode of the scientific space program, even though it's uploaded and public, doesn't show up as it should. I can't see it unless I go into my own video list. So if you haven't seen it and you want to, then you should be able to find it on my channel on the uploaded videos, not just the front page. Anyway, we're sending the space plane using the nuclear engines to much more efficiently move us into Kerbin orbit. Well, if the correct orbit would show up. There we go. Good. And now we do, the same maneuver we always do. We wait till periaps and then we burn. And this maneuver planning was very easy because it just worked. And yeah, I did some tweaking, which took a while, but basically just burn forward and then you end up on Joule. So we have a bit of an inclination, it appears, but I've found that the best way to handle inclinations like this is to just not care. Because when going into Planetary, it smooths out all the differences. It's of course best to go with the equatorial no inclination always, because that's the most simple. But yeah, it tends to work out. So we executed the node, and we do not have our encounter, of course. So we do a little bit of tweaking, just a few meters per second, which should get us a good encounter and compensate for the burn time anomaly. So this isn't doing the right. That maneuver node did not do what it promised at all. Maybe we just need more speed. Yes, there we go. Is it easy as that? Well, okay then. Let's just tweak this in so that we get close and good. And we need a correction burn for inclination and such. So that should actually, let's just not plan that node until we are in the solar orbit. I like to plan the nodes on the orbit I'm on. It usually is more accurate. So there we go. Now we can make our correction node. So we need to correct for inclination, or we won't end up in an equatorial orbit around Joule, which is important because there's going to be other ships there that we need to rendezvous with. And the next thing we're going to do takes a while, so we fast forward a bit until we end up at our Eve fleet that's arriving at Eve. So what we have to do here is slight corrections to make sure we end up in an equatorial orbit and with a low periaps, because we're going to do aero capture maneuvers here to save a lot of fuel. So we just do these small correction nodes, and since all three ships are very close together, we're basically going to have to switch back and forth quite a lot, because we want to have control both when each of these three ships enters Eve's sphere of influence and when each of these three ships do their correction burns. So there's quite a lot of using the Kerbal alarm clock, which is again very useful mod. And once we're inside Eve's sphere of influence, we do our final correction, just a very tiny maneuver to get our height, our periapsis, at the right position, because we are, as said, going to do aero capture maneuvers. So we're gonna do very intense aero braking, basically. So that is our first ship doing its correction and getting a periaps of about 62 something meters, kilometers. And then we switch to our second ship in line, which I noticed could have a better inclination. So we're gonna change that real quick before entering the sphere of influence, which we do. And this ship is then going to do the same thing, correct its periapsis. And getting a maneuver node in here is not super easy, but click around and it works. So this is the hub for the station which we're going to build. Because we're basically sending a station in parts. And the third ship, you see they're still all in the same formation despite being in different spheres of influence. I think that's quite cool. But you know, when you think about it, it really makes sense, and it wouldn't make sense to have it otherwise. So this ship, I misread the numbers, and I put the initial periapsis an order of magnitude higher than it needed to be. So it was around 1 million meters instead of around 100,000 meters. But it's still a small maneuver to correct that. Yeah, so we add alarms for approaching periaps of all ships so that we don't miss anyone and lose them to the fires of re-entry. Instead, we're gonna have perfectly fine fires of re-entry, and we're even gonna do it on the night side, making it more spectacular. As we're coming into the atmosphere at almost 8 kilometers per second before starting to slow down, and that's quite a lot of fire. So we have captured, and now we see if I planned this correctly, and we get a nice and low apoapsis without staying in the atmosphere as it was. It looks good. Fires have stopped, and we have a low and nice apoapsis. So let's then just circularize and call this ship arrived. And I noticed quickly that maneuvering in EF orbit has logical differences to, say, Kerbin, in that you have a shorter period of rotation, because, you know, think about it, higher gravity, higher speed, makes sense. And you also have way more delta V needed to do basic orbital maneuvers, which again makes sense. Higher speeds, higher orbital velocity means more delta V required to change that. It's the opposite of being in orbit around Minmus, basically. And here we get some glitchy looks of Eve's surface. I think it's loading the surface and rendering it when it shouldn't. It should use some placeholder module. Yeah, so that's quite a good orbit. I'm gonna fix it up a little more, I think, while admiring this kind of weird looking planet. I don't think it's supposed to look like that, and no other planet does that. So we're getting into a 200,000 meter orbit, just picking one out of the many. The atmosphere is about at 100,000 meters, so we need to be above that. But the higher orbit we have, the more you have to muck around when coming in from an aero capture, or indeed coming up from the surface, which is going to happen. So we have a station, a space station, the first space station around something that isn't in the Kerbin system. That's quite an achievement, I should say, even though it's technically just a tanker that I have more solar panels and less engines on. Well, the engines are still there, they're just disabled. So we're gonna add this component so we can actually call the station. I really like the shadowing of the re-entry heat. It looks cool when the craft is oscillating like this, and you see that it covers parts of itself with those large docking ports. Yeah, that looks really good. So now we're gonna have to do a combined aero capture and docking rendezvous. So this is gonna be interesting. Yeah, the way Eve looks now is how it should look, I reckon, because, well, from here it's beautiful and doesn't look weird and glitchy at all. So yeah, we have this hub with its intentionally or initially temporary craft. That's the engine part with the RCS nozzles. That's just delivery system, because this isn't really supposed to be a spacecraft at all. It's supposed to be a fixed part of the space station. So we arrive at the station and fine-tune our intercept, because we have a large orbital velocity, so potentially very large relative velocity, and we want to fix that as soon as possible. And after crab walking for a bit, we finally get close enough and the problems with the very uncentered RCS system start to show. But yeah, we get close enough, and yeah, we have the first part of Gamma Station. So we steal all the fuel that we can from this little delivery system and balance what's left, because we're gonna just undock this and throw it into Eve to get rid of it. And this marks the end of the first part of the construction of Gamma Station. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again for the next one. Bye!